My name's Miles Hunt. I'm a drug user. I've used drugs, a lot. This morning I had some coffee, and some joints yesterday. I've got some mushrooms for later. So, last week I had some Panadine for a headache. So I've used all sorts of drugs, and I guess that's what I'm here about. It's talking about it and publicly coming out on the front page of the Herald, and the effects that had on my life. But it's funny. Like even yesterday, I just ran into a friend of mine at the coffee shop, had breakfast, and we were talking about the weekends. I didn't really mention I was coming here to talk about drug law reform and, my experiences. And it was funny that even that moment I was a bit shamed, like not sure how he'd react and that sort of thing, And that's sort of really sad, I think, the stigma that is attached to admitting your drug use. Why... If you take one form of drug, a legal drug, or you get your high through running or climbing mountains or jumping out of planes, it's much more socially acceptable to talk about that. Or if you get your high from things like tobacco or alcohol or things that are legal, it's sort of, again, more acceptable to talk about it. And it seems arbitrary that you can have, it seems unfair really that you stigmatise because of the way you choose to enjoy yourself and to get high. And that's, I think, is absurd and unfair, and that's the main reason why I did it. I'll show you the picture. I'll show myself on the front page. Here I am. That's me there. I was 10 years ago, so I was probably less. I had more colour in my hair. But it says, I've used many drugs. Most was the headline, so that was a good one. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the reasons behind it. It sort of started, there, you want to see it? You can have a look, pass it around, have a look. There's an article in there as well about, it sort of came about from the drug survey, but originally I was a lawyer and I was interested in drug law reform. It's like an injustice to me that people get arrested and lives get affected by, what drug they take. That is just unfair and immoral. So I sort of looked around to join the drug law reform movement, and I ran for the Senate in 2013 for the Drug Law Reform Party. Yeah, with Greg Chipp. This is Greg Chipp, the head of the Drug Law Reform Party. He got me into drug law reform movement. Thank you, Greg. So I rang Greg up. We had a great chat, and he invited me to sort of join the party. And then, by a bit of luck and things, I ended up being on the ticket, on the Senate ticket. And we got about 2,770 votes. I think it was 0.01% of the vote in New South Wales, which, us and Hemp probably shared a bit of the vote back then. But also, I think that was enough for Ricky Muir to get elected in Victoria for the driving party. So it could, if we had the preference whisperers, we may have got elected. But that year, the state candidate was David, who got in. On that sort of extra seat was David Unharm from the Liberal Democrats, who actually supported legalisation. But so that was my orientation. Then me and this guy Will, we set up this Unharm, sort of an organisation around reducing harm for drugs. And sort of out of that, someone from the Herald rang me up. I don't know how they got my number, and they said they wanted to do an article about someone coming out about their drug use, in touch with the fact that there'd just been this drug survey that showed like 80% of people that's taken a drug in the last year, or 35% of people had taken a drug, and maybe higher throughout their life. But so I just sort of did an interview, told them all the drugs that I'd used and the reasons why I sort of was in the movement. And like the day before, she rang me up and said, are you prepared to be famous tomorrow? And I was like, well, I didn't really know what she was talking about, because I assumed it'd be in the middle of the paper, and that they wouldn't, and they got a guy to do a photo, so I thought, I'll do a little photo, and it'll be hidden away and I'll be fine. But then I came to work the next day, walked in from Paddington, came to my office, saw the paper on the ground that they delivered, and there was my mug looking up at me, and I thought, oh no, what have I done here? Of course. I didn't tell my parents, and so they got the paper delivered as well, and my mum sort of saw it at breakfast, saw her son looking up at her.
What drugs did you do on the day?
On that day, yeah. But a few beers to calm the nerves. But my sister rang me up saying my mum was in hysterics. She'd rung her saying, Miles was on front page, ruined his life, and she thought I'd been killed or something. So she rang me up to check I was okay, and it's all good. And then I spoke to my mum and she said, oh, you know, she was worried about me ruining my career and my job as a lawyer and ruining my life and reputation. So these sort of things I probably didn't consider properly. But yeah, I mean, it was okay. And like my partner at the time, she was a supportive drug user herself. Friends had mostly used drugs, and you know, I think the general vibe I got is a lot of people use drugs and have used drugs, but you know, like talking about it publicly is still something that is you know, sure, there's a shame, there's a stigma, which is, you know, bullshit, I think. But like, so yeah, I mean, the personal, okay, like in terms of the hello, come in, yeah, the in terms of the work side of it, as a lawyer, yeah, I was working for my best friend. Like, he had a law firm, a small personal injury law firm, and so he was upstairs, and in the office. I was downstairs. I was a bit nervous about talking to him about it, you know. And then what I heard is there was a guy who had just joined the firm from the workers' union, and he said AWU would give us work and all this sort of thing. And then he hadn't been able to materialise that work. And then as soon as my article was out, he was telling my mate and the boss. He's like, "Oh, I can't get the work now, and it's ruined that." And then people were talking to my mate. He's my mate from university, David. They were talking to him about the reputational damage to the firm and all this sort of stuff. And so we had a meeting, and you know, like I told him that, you know, all the reasons and the fact that I wasn't aware that it was going to be on the front page. I thought it'd be in the middle. I'm not sure if that would have changed anything if I'd known. Yeah, at least I had that excuse, you know. Yeah, and then you know, I guess he didn't like confrontation. I was his best friend from uni. We travelled around South America together. We did San Pedro cactus in an Inca cave, and you know, had done cocaine in La Paz, and done plenty of weed and all sorts of stuff. So, you know, I knew he was supportive of drug use, and overall, I think that obviously that was his baby, the firm. There was a concern that there was going to be some damage to the reputation, but there was only one of my clients. I had like 300 personal injury clients. Only one of them mentioned it, rang up, and he spoke to him, and he took her claim, but no one else. We didn't lose any clients from it. I mean, I don't know, a lot of people on workers' comp maybe that I was dealing with didn't read the Sydney Morning Herald or didn't care, you know, like whatever, but we didn't lose any clients. In terms of, I mean, I got a few criminal law clients out of it from people, users. I came up here and spoke here at Mardi Gras, and you know, gave people some advice. And I mean, I didn't really do much criminal law, but I did a few pleas after that for cannabis use, and that was one of the reasons why I was driven to it, because, you know, I had a friend who couldn't be a paramedic because of a cannabis charge. I did another case for a young family friend of mine who got done cannabis at a train station, 15 grams. They didn't give him a caution, and you know, and that process of going through the judiciary and all that sort of thing is just awful. You know, like it really affects people, and there's like 80,000 odd of those small cannabis sort of and small possession charges a year. It's just absurd. So that was the reasons. And anyway, so I'll get back to the work side of things. Was like we survived, but we had a look at the website, like the most number of searches for our firm happened that day, and all the links were from other law firms and from the Law Society. So it was other lawyers who were interested about who was the drug-taking lawyer. They were scouring and having a look.
You're a sought-after man.
Yeah. Well, and then for the next like 2 weeks, I was sort of like infamous, I guess. I don't know, famous and bit humorously as well in the law community. The drug-taking lawyer, they called me, and I'd go to the barristers' conferences and they'd all have a laugh. But then, actually, before I came up here, my old boss and good friend David, he told me that he got taken aside by quite a conservative barrister, who he thought was conservative, who said to him at a conference, he was really impressed with what I did and very proud. Like, he thought it was a really impressive thing to do, to come out and do that, even though this guy seemed like someone who'd be against it. He was supportive of the fact that I did do it. So that, I think, yeah, that was nice to hear that, you know, like, and then through the Bar Association came out a few years later with a policy supporting drug legalisation, and you know, like, I wouldn't say it's common for people to talk about their drug use, but I think it's increased a bit over time, and I know politicians often say, oh, I smoked or I didn't inhale and all that sort of stuff, but it should be something that is done, you know, like that you can talk about openly and honestly, and it doesn't cause any harm. But yeah, I was a bit lucky in a way because it was my best friend who ran that law firm. You know, like if I'd working at another law firm, they may have fired me, right, that day. And so if I'd been fired from my law job, and then you're this infamous drug-taking lawyer, what jobs could I get then, you know? I could potentially go down a negative situation, right?
Start a new brand.
Yeah, set up, right, exactly, that's what I have to do. Use it for your own benefit. But so there is those risks, and I feel sort of there's some privilege and luck involved, and these sort of, in my story, that it hasn't had a hugely negative impact. It's sort of been generally positive, I'd say. But that's definitely the case. And the Law Society, I mean, I did do an article, an opinion piece straight after, because I was a bit worried about the Law Society striking me off, because to be a lawyer you're meant to be a fit and proper person to act as a lawyer, whatever that means. I guess you can screw people over and deceive people and be dishonest, but you know, maybe you can't break the law. So I started that article saying, I've used drugs and that's why I'm coming forward to tell my story. I'm a lawyer, my drug use has no connection with my job, it's a choice I've made. So I tried to sort of mitigate the potential damage, and I set out my reasons for legalisation, you know, like the decriminalisation, regulation. Sort of there's so many reasons, but like the moral imperative, that why is the government choosing what things you can imbibe? And the medical sort of, you know, like it's healthier to be able to buy drugs that regulated and from a safe place and not necessarily manufactured in dodgy conditions. And the economic side about the benefits to society and having tax or not spending the money on the criminal court system and the policing. And then you have the justice side, like stopping people going through that process of being criminalised because of this. So there was all those reasons I set out, and then I set out the reasons why I came forward as well. I was like, how can we as a society these laws are broken, these drug laws are failing us. How can we as a society get better laws if we can't talk about this stuff, right? If we can't openly have an honest conversation about drugs, about use, of people who use it, which is clearly the drug survey, which they were showed a great percentage of people in the society admitting that use. But people can't talk about it publicly. There's this stigma, there's this shame. How can we get better laws? So that was my theory, that if I could be a small way, help in that regard, contribute to it being a more open discussion, maybe better laws would come. So that was my theory. So I set that out in the article, and the idea was as well with that piece that it's not about my job, it's about justice. And I think like a lawyer, I had this in my head, I had prepared a response when the Law Society came knocking, if they did, which would be, you know, like it's my job as a lawyer to support just laws. If I was a lawyer in 1860s America, I would want to say that I'd be against slavery, and I'd be public about that. You know, if I was living in New South Wales in the 80s, I'd be against the criminalisation of homosexuality. So I don't think a lawyer has to uphold bad laws. I think it's part of our job and part of everyone's job to push for better laws. Every citizen in a democracy, I think that's our duty. Oh, thank you. Yeah, and so that was the response I was going to make, but they never came. So it turned out a friend of mine was dating a secretary who worked at the Law Society, and my name came up in a discussion. What should we do with this guy, you know? And then some people were saying we should do, you know, put out a notice, like response. You've got to provide a written response. Some people were like, oh no, that's, you know, like let it go. And then they talked about it, and then they forgot about it. You know, they moved on to the next thing. And so I was fortunate that, you know, again, a bit of luck there that they didn't do anything. But I had a prepared speech, a response. But yeah, that was the Law Society, and that was my future. But I guess when I did the article, when I came out, when I didn't know I was going to be on the front page, I wasn't fully aware of the potential ramifications. And I'm glad that it all worked out in a way. But there was certainly like risk, and I feel that I was lucky with it. My mate was my boss, that the Law Society didn't write that article. That, you know, maybe like my background, having, you know, being sort of white and middle class, going to private school and being able to articulate my responses well, and may have sort of helped being a lawyer. You know, there's benefits as that as well. And I noticed that when I worked in Unharm, I could talk publicly about my drug use and I never really had huge issues. I mean, I did some work with the sniffer dogs with David Shoebridge many years ago because of the false positives and the fact that it was, again, a totally unjust law where police are using sniffer dogs to get around the protection that is afforded to people of you can only search someone with reasonable suspicion. Well, the sniffer dogs allow police to get around that, and they can search whoever they want, and that's another unjust law. So I've been to festivals and I've seen, a black friend of mine got searched and I didn't. We'd both been taking drugs together in the camp. We're smart. We didn't take him to the festival. A long bearded sort of stoner-looking guy searched again. So it was no one had drugs on them, and it was like there's definitely discrimination involved in our drug laws, and there's vilification, and there's treat people if you're in a socio-economically disadvantaged position, you're going to be inversely infected in an inversely high way than otherwise. If you have to catch a train somewhere, you're more likely to be stopped and searched. If you have to take drugs in public because you haven't necessarily got the capacity to do it in private, if you have to buy it off the street as opposed to have it delivered to your house, if you're taking certain drugs over others, then that there's certainly an element, but it's not all. There's an unfair enforcement of those drug laws. So I'm aware of that I maybe was lucky, and those unharmed meetings where I could say, look, I've taken drugs, and there's other people who would say that if they'd taken drugs, their drug use was much more affected by the police searching and the police, being part of that. And so, I think that's important to acknowledge in my story. And, ultimately, we're in an information world where things move quickly. So probably quicker now than then, but I was sort of infamous for a couple of weeks in the law community, but I came up here, Michael Balderstone introduced me as the drug taking lawyer, and I spoke briefly at a rally, which was nice. You feel good about it, what you've done. Being part of that movement, this movement, we're all part of, which is nice to be part of that and to contribute in some small way. But things move on, you're forgotten in a couple, that didn't stay forever, and so you get a bit sad. I remind people all the time, for a little while, but the reality is things move on. So it's good in a way because then you're forgotten. And now I work as a lawyer at a union and the arts union for actors, and that was 5 years after I got the job. They asked about my drug law reform stuff, and I said I was working doing some director work for Unharm, but I wasn't actively running for Parliament or anything. But I suppose they'd be supportive of that, given Labor and all that sort of thing. But it shows you that things move on, so you can come out and potentially, it doesn't affect your life and doesn't ruin it, and you can contribute. And my story is one, I hope, of hope, and the one that I feel glad to have been part of the whole thing, and maybe in a small way helped people talk about it more openly. And maybe, and I'm seeing it's great to see the way drug laws are slowly, and it's a slow process. I remember Greg in 2013 was ahead of his game saying we've got to legalise drugs, decriminalise them and things like that. And now 10 years on, it's slowly happening. It's been slowly happening. There's been a lot of people in the movement, even from the 90s, like Alex Wodak, and people who did stuff around legalised injection centres and things like that. This has been a slow 20, 30-year movement, but you can really start to see it ramping up with cannabis law reform, medicinal cannabis and recreational. So, I guess that's it. That's my story, really. So thank you all. I guess thanks all for coming and listening to me speak. Really appreciate your time. And thanks everyone for, if anyone's got any questions.
Being brave.
No, thank you. Cheers. Yeah, that's right. All right. Cool.